Imagine a bitterly cold white night stretching on endlessly as Orion Northwood, the steadfast mechanic, dives headfirst into the blizzard to save Marlo Sinclair, the CEO left unconscious in the merciless freeze. Every turn of the wheel and every labored breath unveils a shocking secret, weaving a fateful bond amid a blinding snowstorm. Like an endless white blanket, Orion Northwood drove his old Chevy through rapidly fading tire tracks, feeling as if he were navigating a void where the wind howled through pine forests, its icy fingers grazing the windshield. Inside the cab, Vesper Northwood slept soundly under a thin quilt, her steady breaths fragile as a faint drumbeat in the silence. Frost faintly traced the curve of her lashes on the window, like tiny snowflakes melting upon contact with the glass, a reminder of life's fleeting nature in the harsh storm. Orion's brow furrowed, cold sweat freezing at his temples as the radio blared a weather warning, visibility down to a few meters, roads too treacherous to turn back. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his weathered hands hardened by frost and wind, defying the icy gusts that coated his fingers in a thin layer of frost. The heater groaned weakly, like the last breath of a freezing soul, but within Orion, the warmth of duty burned brighter than any instinct of fear. Each gust sweeping across the rearview mirror was a reminder. The road home was not just a distance, but a series of trials woven between life and death. As Orion scanned the roadside, a faint glow of taillights flickered from a Range Rover tilted in a snowbank, resembling a dark oar in a white desert. Lost and silently waiting, his heart pounded like a raging torrent in his chest. Some primal urge compelled the young man to stop, despite the storm threatening to swallow everything. Pulling over, Orion Northwood tucked the quilt tighter around Vesper, then stepped out of the truck in grease-stained clothes, his figure resolute against the blizzard, like a steadfast monument. The bone-chilling cold lashed at his face, stirring memories of childhood, steeped in the scent of motor oil and coal fires in the garage. Pressing his ear to the Range Rover's window, he heard faint breaths, like groans from another world. Without hesitation, he grabbed a crowbar from under the seat, wedged it into the door's crevice, and pried it open with a decisive yank. The sound of shattering glass crackled through the thick snow, a chaotic symphony of nature and human will. As the door gave way, Orion found a woman lying motionless, her frail form scattered in the storm like a bitter snowflake. Without a second thought, he scooped her up, feeling her skin as cold as frozen meat, her lips purple like wilted petals. He draped his thick coat over her and trudged back to the truck, through snow up to his ankles, each step heavy but resolute. The engine roared softly to life, exhaling a warm breath that spread vitality. Orion slid into the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other steadying the woman. As Vesper stirred awake, one curious eye opening. "Daddy, who is she?" she asked. He managed a faint smile, replying softly, "Someone who needs help, sweetheart." The Chevy pressed forward through the sea of snow, its headlights slicing through the night like a silver blade, guiding three lost souls toward refuge. In the small cab, warmth from the heater seeped through thick coats, beads of sweat mingling with tears, carrying faith in a fragile future. The storm still raged outside, but within, the warmth of compassion had taken root, awakening a yearning for humanity in the frigid night. The dim headlights flickered like weary eyes across the dark vehicle, as Orion Northwood gently lifted the crowbar from under the seat, his hand taut like a bowstring before release. The metal scraped lightly against the doorframe, then shattered with a series of sharp cracks echoing through the white void. Snow-laden gusts rushed in like a flock of black crows, snatching at the remaining glass fragments and blasting through the gap into the cabin. The cold tore through Orion's outer coat, seeping into his skin, reminding him that the storm's fiercest moment came when it was broken by a resolute hand. As the last shard of glass fell to the ground, Orion leaned inside, drawing a breath as if to infuse life into his purple lips. The faint light barely revealed the crumpled form of a motionless woman, her skin pale as wax paper. Without pause, he slipped his arms under her shoulders, feeling her limp body like a broken doll. Each step crunched through the frozen snow under his boots, dragging Marlo Sinclair heavily through snow up to his ankles. The wind lashed like iron whips, turning their breaths into fragile wisps that dissolved into the icy veil. With every step Orion took, his trembling hands gripped her coat tighter, steadying her frail frame against the raging tempest. The snow buried the path, pushing their bodies back as if to swallow them into the frozen earth. But his will was forged like steel, unyielding. The storm was not just an enemy, but a test of courage. In that moment, the wind's howl became a pounding drum, urging each step toward the journey back to life. When the silhouette of the truck emerged after a winding stretch of road, Orion shuddered, feeling the warmth from the heater seep into his frostbitten skin. He carefully placed Marlo Sinclair in the passenger seat, propping her upright and draping a thick fur coat over her shoulders. The door slammed shut, its sound ringing through the night like a declaration. "We still have a chance." He turned the key, the engine sputtering to life before settling into a steady roar, like a heart reviving from the brink. The engine hummed, pushing back the snow that obscured the view each time the headlights sliced through the dark. Orion's eyes stayed fixed on the white road, one hand steering, the other checking Marlo's wrist for a pulse, hoping to hear steady breaths. In the back, Vesper Northwood clutched her blanket, listening to the engine's hum like a symphony of hope. The warm yellow glow from the dashboard reflected on her small face, creating a gentle calm amid the storm. The truck surged through layers of snow, its tires scraping against steep embankments, echoing the storm's relentless rumble outside. But inside, warmth began to prevail, banishing the chill that recalled those first moments after the glass shattered. Each meter conquered was a testament. Kindness triumphs over every challenge. Though the storm still raged outside, the narrow path carved between snow and headlight beams stood as proof of the power of swift action and enduring humanity. Through every curve, every jolt of the frozen terrain, the journey of three souls, a mechanic, a powerful woman, and a little girl, continued, fading into the night but burning brightly in their hearts. As the truck's wheels came to a quiet halt on the snowy gravel before the modest house, Orion Northwood drew a deep breath, as if sowing warmth into the frigid air. He stepped out of the cab, his clothes dusted with tiny ice fragments, his steps slow but resolute, each crunch underfoot a marker of the temporary safety they had secured. Inside, the wood stove's flames danced beneath a blackened iron grate, casting a warm orange glow that stretched into every corner of the room. The walls, patched with uneven newspaper, mingled with the rich scent of coffee and pine resin, creating the living breath of a home that knew how to wait. Orion gently pushed the door open, its creak a rustic greeting, then bent down to carefully lift Marlo Sinclair from the cab. Her limp body, still chilled like thawing ice beneath her damp coat, weighed lightly in his arms. He settled her onto the worn sofa by the stove, where the heat buzzed like invisible honeybees, and pulled an old wool blanket, knitted by his grandmother, its frayed edges a reminder of family warmth, over her with deliberate care, each stitch a nod to enduring traditions. Kneeling, he removed her soaked boots, then retrieved a pair of clean wool socks from a basket near the stove. The coarse threads, emblematic of resilience, slipped over her icy feet, coaxing nascent warmth into her frostbitten toes. Without pause, Orion moved quietly to the small table by the stove, where a rusted kettle steamed with hot water. He poured it into a chipped, rough ceramic mug, adding chamomile tea laced with sweet honey, and gently placed it before Marlo. His hands trembled as they touched the mug, as if passing along a piece of his own vitality. As she tilted her head, her lips quivering against the warmth, faint wisps of breath curled into the air. Orion's gaze never wavered, his eyes heavy with concern, yet alight with steadfast faith. Time slowed, each moment unfolding like a dream in reality. The fire's red glow painted shimmering shapes on the walls through the stove's glass, and the clink of a spoon against the mug blended with the crackle of burning wood, forming a rare melody in the icy night. From behind, Vesper Northwood tiptoed out from the living room curtain, her wide, curious eyes fixed on the scene. Her small hand clutched the edge of Marlo's blanket, a child eager to share warmth. "Is she okay, Daddy?" Her soft voice chimed, like a bell echoing through the quiet. Orion looked up, his eyes softer than ever, and nodded gently. "She just needs to warm up, sweetheart." He glanced at his daughter, then back to the woman before him, feeling an unspoken bond form among three lives: a single father, an innocent girl, and an uninvited guest, strong enough to banish all cold. The room grew strangely warm as Marlo Sinclair's first faint sounds emerged, her breaths weak but enough to signal her return to the world. Her eyes drifted across the small space, settling on Orion's face, streaked with firelight shadows, then softening as they met Vesper, nestled beside her father. For a moment everything seemed to pause. Breaths, flames, the snow beyond the window, merging into a serene yet resilient tableau. As dawn's faint light peeked through the window slats, the stove burned its final log, and the house grew even more tranquil. Orion stood, tending the fire to keep it steady, then quietly gathered his tools, leaving Marlo and Vesper in a moment of intimate, hopeful connection. In his heart, the small house stood as a steadfast fortress, sheltering three wayward souls from the storm. The breakfast waiting on the stove promised a sincerity that would linger long beyond the morning, as dawn gently poured golden light over the frosted pine canopy. Orion Northwood slowly pushed open the wooden door, leaving behind the familiar warmth of the stove and the faint scent of pine smoke. The air outside was crisp as shattered glass, with beams of light weaving through the branches, casting glimmers on the thick snow. The wind had stilled, leaving only the steady drip of melting ice from the eaves, each drop falling like a heartbeat, rediscovering its rhythm. Orion slipped on his thick coat, the coarse wool embracing his shoulders, a reminder that even in the cold, warmth could be found. He bent into the truck's cab, retrieving a gleaming battery charger from the trunk. The metal caught the morning sun, sparkling like polished shards of glass, promising new life to the engine frozen overnight. Each step he took compressed the snow, the grains crunching beneath his boots in a strange, cold symphony brimming with hope. Inside the house, Marlo Sinclair and Vesper Northwood nestled under wool blankets, the fire's glow reflecting on their cheeks, coaxing warmth back into their skin. Vesper's eyes sparkled as she watched the TV, where animated characters danced in a vibrant, warm world, like the last rays of sunlight clinging to a snowflake. Marlo watched the girl and gave a slow smile, her gaze quiet but radiant with gratitude for the father who hadn't left them alone in the cold. Over an hour later, Orion had cleared the snow packed around the Range Rover's hood, each block of ice breaking away like fragments in an ink-wash painting. He removed the old battery, wiped the connectors with a rag soaked in antifreeze, and carefully installed the charged one. Tiny sparks flared briefly like winter fireworks, and when the engine roared to life, its soft sputter echoed through the misty air. A testament that challenges could be overcome by will. Stepping back inside, Orion's coat bore a white outline, blending with the kitchen's warm pine smoke. He set his tools on the table, leaned down and kissed Marlo's forehead, the lingering chill on her skin now faint, passing warmth to her. Vesper rushed over, wrapping her arms around his neck, her eyes brimming with pride and admiration. The three stood in the small space, but Vesper's laughter rang out like a melodic tune in a silent forest. Outside, snow vapor rose in the morning sun, melting into glistening droplets on the branches. The landscape donned a new guise. Thin ice peeled away, revealing damp earth and the faint cracks of paths once trodden. Sunlight danced on the snow, scattering hundreds of tiny rays like invisible eyes watching a peaceful moment after the storm. In the kitchen, steam curled from a pot of ginger tea laced with honey, filling the air and awakening the senses, banishing the last traces of cold. Orion invited Marlo and Vesper to the table, where 3 steaming mugs awaited, each a promise of care, trust, and warmer days ahead. As they sipped the first taste of tea, the wind outside dwindled to a sparse whisper, like the fading notes of a tempest symphony. In that brief moment, the worries of the long night and storm seemed to dissolve, making way for a new light of hope. Amid the spreading warmth, they understood that as long as they had each other, they could face any cold. As dawn draped a soft veil through the window, the ticking of the living room clock sounded like a prelude to a new day, rousing Orion Northwood from bed. He slipped through the creaking door toward the small garage at the yard's end. The air still held a misty haze, but the old truck's engine coughed a stubborn chug under the chassis, as if taunting time, urging him to quicken his pace. His coveralls, stained with dried grease, felt intimate in the pale light, like armor forged in everyday battles. He bent over the engine bay, tightening bolts, the scent of metal and raw oil mingling with the warmth of his breath. Orion's every motion was steady, deliberate. His hand trembled slightly as he turned the screwdriver, then steadied as gears clicked into place, a rhythm of routine laced with resolve. Behind the garage door, on a wobbly wooden table, Vesper Northwood had settled at some point, her head tilted over a sketchbook, fingers gliding lightly over colored pencils. She softly whistled a tune from the cartoon she and her father had played for Marlo Sinclair the night before, smiling as her pencil danced across the blank page, sketching small houses, snow-draped pines, and a woman in a warm fur coat. Vesper's eyes sparkled like morning dew, reflecting excitement for breakfast and the tender warmth of her father's hands. Her soft giggles echoed in the quiet garage, softening the scent of grease and the faint flicker of the fluorescent light, a reminder that even the harshest workplace held the glow of family. Unhurried by the clock, Orion lowered the hood and turned toward the garage door, where Vesper held up her drawing proudly. He nodded encouragingly, his eyes gleaming with quiet pride. The truck's wheels rolled them back to the wooden house, where the door greeted them with the lingering scent of coffee on the long table, steam rising from a small ceramic cup. Stepping into the living room, they found Marlo Sinclair awake, wrapped in the old wool blanket under the warm golden glow of the fireplace, her gaze calm yet brimming with gratitude. She smoothed the blanket's edge, as if caressing the memory of the stormy night, and met the father and daughter with a sincere smile, like a ray of sunlight in the frigid winter. Breakfast was served, hearty potato soup, warm and thick, crisp brown bread with butter and honey, the aromas mingling with the stove's heat. Orion set a bowl before Marlo, nodding as if imparting a wish for peace. Each spoonful she took brought a flush to her cheeks, like a mountain flower blooming after frost. Vesper, eyes alight, watched her would-be foster mother, then turned to her father with a beaming grin. In that moment, no words were needed. 3 lives, a mechanic father, a budding young artist, and a powerful CEO blended into a vivid tableau. The scents of engine oil and ginger tea intertwined, the stove's soft clatter harmonizing with Vesper's gentle hum, weaving a simple yet profound symphony. Marlo's gaze met Orion's, and in the silence they knew an invisible bond had formed. Compassion and trust would guide them through any challenge, from the humble garage to towering boardrooms. As the distant school bell signaled the start of classes, Vesper hurriedly donned her coat, scampering to the door in her small boots. Before leaving, she turned to wave at her foster mother and father, a wordless gesture brimming with faith in a new day filled with hope and warmth. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the frost-draped pine canopy, Orion Northwood rose swiftly, leaving the warm blanket on the bed and ambling toward the window. The room still echoed with the storm's lingering hum, the wooden walls creaking softly, as if whispering of the melting icicles outside. He stood there briefly, eyes half closed, drawing a deep breath to gather the remnants of warmth, then gave a faint smile at the memory of the previous night, when thick snow sealed the truck's windows and his hands frantically shattered ice to bring Marlo Sinclair to safety. A quiet resolve settled on his grease-streaked face, like a gray canvas touched by a small spark of light. The image of the fireplace still glowing red radiating fierce warmth against the cold. He reached into a drawer for his alarm clock phone, checking the time. 6:30 in the morning. The steady chime of the alarm pulsed like a heart still racing, recalling the moments he broke through ice to save her. Orion descended the stairs, each wooden step creaking in tune with the melody of memory, leading him to the small garage attached to the house. On the round table in the living room, last night's coffee cup steamed, faintly, its cracked porcelain pattern still holding warmth. He poured a fresh cup, his hands trembling from lack of sleep but his eyes bright with gratitude. Outside, a thin layer of snow dusted the road, but his old Chevy purred smoothly, its soft rumble a declaration. The trials of the night had passed, and daily life was resuming. Orion drove out of the garage, his voice gentle. "Ready for a new day, Vesper?" The girl was already at her small workbench, eyes narrowed from a brief yawn, but quickly alight with excitement at seeing her father. Her nimble hands sketched on worn paper. But today Vesper drew not snow-laden pines, but 3 figures holding hands, striding through a storm. Amid the clank of metal tools and the sharp scent of oil, Orion paused, leaning over to study the drawing with a nod. The ruler, colored pencils, and tiny hands of his daughter lit up the garage, blending with the lively hum of the engine. He pinned the sketch to the wall like a poster reminding him why he fought each day, not for work, but for love and faith in goodness. The next challenge didn't wait. Marlo Sinclair's SUV still sat under snow, its battery charged overnight but needing a thorough engine check. Orion wiped the connectors clean, tightened bolts, and muttered a silent prayer. "One more time, all right?" When the engine sparked to life, coughing before settling into a smooth hum, he exhaled, a rush of triumph like a freshly poured cup of ginger honey tea. Returning to the house, the stove's warmth curled around every corner. Marlo Sinclair was already there, her eyes tracking his steps. Her smile held a trace of sorrow, but her gaze blazed with gratitude. "Thank you for coming for me," she said softly, her voice dissolving into the warm air. Orion only nodded, his tone quiet. No need for thanks, just what needed to be done. That silent moment carried the gentle sweetness of sincerity. Vesper rushed over, wrapping her arms around them both, her clear laughter ringing like a soundtrack to an unexpected family portrait. In the seamless bridge between a stormy past and a warm present, 3 souls, a mechanic father, a budding artist, and a CEO, were bound by the invisible thread of compassion, promising peaceful days that would shine brighter than any storm. On the wooden porch, dusted with frost like lingering wisps of cold, Orion Northwood sat quietly, a cream-colored letter resting on his knee, the trembling dawn playing through the leaves across the yard. Each elegant black stroke of ink seemed to carve into his mind, "Dear Orion Northwood." In that moment, his heart sank, then surged. The small house was silent, save for the crackle of the wood stove, and the steady breaths of Vesper Northwood, standing behind him. Her wide eyes watched her father patiently, as if awaiting a miracle. The words on the page summoned the stormy night, the motionless Range Rover, the crunch of shattered glass, Marlo Sinclair's stilled breath in the bitter cold. The handwriting spoke of the quiet garage, the warm stove, and the kindness of a stranger, himself. "You reminded me of something I thought I'd forgotten. Dignity and compassion when no one is watching," she wrote. Orion trembled, his eyes reddening. The letter was more than gratitude. It offered a chance, an invitation to become head of engineering at Sinclair Motor Works in Helena, along with full payment for his home. An unexpected gift beyond imagining. Marlo Sinclair's bold signature stood as a monument to the harsh memory they'd shared. He folded the letter, pressing it to his chest, gazing at the distant horizon. The faint rays of sunlight became a guiding torch, awakening dreams he thought long dormant. A gentle morning breeze teased his hair, easing the fatigue etched into his sun-weathered face. He smiled faintly, a tear falling onto his jacket, mingling with the night's dew. Vesper ran to him, wrapping her arms tightly around her father, her sparkling eyes asking, "Are you crying, Daddy?" Orion leaned down, smoothing her hair, his voice thick. "Yeah, I'm crying because I'm happy." The girl, innocent as a snowflake blooming in the cold, flashed a smile that banished all worries. The morning light filtered through the trees, painting soft golden streaks across their faces, capturing a warmth never felt before. In that tender moment, the magic of kindness shone clear. A decisive act in a stormy night had transformed three seemingly unconnected lives: a mechanic, an innocent daughter, and a powerful CEO. Orion felt a steadfast faith take root in his chest. No matter how tough life became, compassion would find its way back. Hundreds of miles away, on the top floor of a gleaming glass tower, Marlo Sinclair held a handwritten letter of her own, her eyes glinting with emotion and admiration, lines describing the stove, Orion's calloused hands, all tucked into the pocket of her costly suit, carrying priceless value. She set the letter on her desk, where her laptop glowed, awaiting today's critical meeting. But in that moment, she saw no market maps or revenue charts, only her promise to herself to preserve the flame of kindness he'd ignited in the dark. The frosted glass curtain outside hid the city's frenetic pulse, but Marlo's heart beat to the gentle rhythm of gratitude. She pressed a hand to the window, gazing at the sprawling city below, and whispered, "Thank you." In two different worlds, a humble wooden house and a modern tower, they shared a single belief: when you give kindness, it returns, greater than you could ever imagine. And the new day had truly begun. As the last rays of sunlight melted into Helena's horizon, Orion Northwood stepped slowly from his weathered pickup and approached the grand gate, etched with Sinclair Motor Works, Helena Training Facility, his breath mingling with a breeze carrying the scent of fur. His new technician's uniform, a crisp white shirt and a gray vest embroidered with the company logo, hugged his sturdy frame, a modern suit of armor shielding him from any hardship. Each step on the concrete floor traced a rhythm of beginnings, the clank of the gate's lock echoing like a school bell heralding a day brimming with endless possibilities. In the reception area, warm golden light spilled over a polished desk, where neatly stacked files stood like goals waiting to be conquered. The training facility unfolded in Orion's mind like a vast map. The engine practice room, the theory classroom, the machine shop, and the small auditorium at the hallway's end. Each space pulsed with technology and precision, yet behind the clear glass panels he still recalled the wooden house where the storm once battered the garage, where the wood stove's glow and chamomile tea warmed like human kindness. He entered the practice room, where trainees awaited, their eyes sparkling with hope as they recognized the legendary mechanic. Their lively greetings rang out like applause, ushering in a new chapter of his career. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Marlo Sinclair stood by her high-rise office window, gazing at a steaming cup of ginger honey tea on her desk, watching faint wisps of steam dissolve in the air-conditioned chill. Under LED lights, a chart of the Helena Training Facility project flickered on her screen. Each number and blueprint bore the stamp of her vision: to make this a breeding ground for talent. Emails with work updates flooded in, but in that paused moment she felt the heartbeat of her partner, Orion Northwood, striving to fulfill the promise of raising training standards. The chart's lines seemed to soften, curving like a gentle river flowing into the future. Small but brimming with energy, Vesper Northwood slung on her backpack and bounded into school, her radiant smile lighting the way. She skipped across the wide courtyard, greeting friends with a voice as clear as morning breeze. Her tiny hands clutched a drawing of three figures: her father, her foster mother, and herself, holding hands through a storm. The vibrant colors on the paper revealed a child's unshakable faith that kindness always finds its harbor. She pinned the artwork to the school bulletin board, where her teacher and classmates marveled, planting seeds of belief in the magic of sharing. As the day leaned toward dusk, the sunset bathed the tin roofs and glass windows where Marlo prepared to leave the office in shades of pink. All three worlds seemed to converge through countless glimmers: the truck's headlights, the steady workshop lamps, the classroom streetlights. Each beam was a piece of an invisible bridge linking the lives of Orion, Vesper, and Marlo. They didn't share the same space, but they shared a single pulse: the belief that when compassion is sown, it takes root and grows, transcending distance and prejudice. One day soon, that light would illuminate every corner of the world, like an endless dawn guiding brave and sincere hearts. Having witnessed Orion Northwood's brave journey through the blizzard, Marlo Sinclair's gentle grace upon waking, and Vesper Northwood's curious gaze, I'm struck by the power of compassion in the face of adversity. Thank you for watching Millionaire and Heart Stories. See you next time.